Well, welcome everybody. This is Ian Altman, and welcome to our Hurdlr broadcast or webinar today. And the folks at Hurdlr have created a great piece of technology that, candidly, they didn't want to talk about today. But most of us on this call have actually played with it, used the technology, and think it's great, so you should check it out. I'm joined today by a lot of just great people here.
John, a woman with no tops just walked right behind you as this webinar, no bottom, as the webinar started.
So I apologize for completely losing composure. But so we've got Jon Goodman, Jason Connell is here, Sharí Alexander, Joey Coleman, of course Michael Port, and Clay Hebert, I believe, is going to be joining us as well today. And we're talking about tips and our best advice for things that can help propel your speaking career. And I know that we're starting with Jon, and we're going to have time at the end for Q&A. And Jon, in addition to being a best-selling author of Viralnomics and has done amazing things, is really going to talk to people about this idea of self-publishing and how you can be successful as a self-publisher. So, Jon, let me kick it over to you.
How's it going, Ian?
I've never been finer. So talk to me about this in terms of the big mistakes that people make when it comes to self-publishing.
Absolutely. I think the biggest mistake people make in self-publishing is not producing a polished, finished product. I mean, most self-published books are really pretty junk, to be honest.
Yeah. And so what makes a book look professional versus looking like junk?
Yeah, absolutely. It comes down to hiring really, really good editors, designers, and almost interior designers, too. I think a lot of people don't even put that much attention to, I mean, even something as seemingly minute as font selection. For example, but all of these things, just the experience of a book. I guess put it this way, if I can define it in one statement. If people shouldn't see your design, they should feel your design. And if you've done that, then you've done a good job.
Yeah, I will tell you that the first book that I published, I did entirely self-publishing, and I thought it was good. And the second one, people say, wow, this thing's really professional. And I couldn't necessarily tell you what the difference is, but I know, like, I can feel it. I just don't know what it is, which I think there was a senator that had something similar and a similar topic about that. But now I know that you can create something that looks great and that's a great feeling book, but isn't necessarily going to have the marketing success or commercial success that people would like. And so can you walk us through some of the marketing strategies that you've successfully implemented and that you guide other people through?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton of time, but effectively it comes down to three things that you want your book to have upon launch. One is a host of social proof, so a host of Amazon reviews, which we can talk about, I guess, getting those initially if you want, Ian. The second is some sort of intangible, and so something that's going to make people who hit your page immediately want to buy your book. So for me, that was a quote from a renowned expert in the field named Jonah Berger, who's professor at the Wharton School of Business, New York Times bestselling author, Contagious. You need some sort of intangible element. And then the third is just to produce a really good work, of course, that stands by itself. I mean, the goal of any kind of marketing is to produce is to get a critical mass of people to see your work, and then the quality of it has to speak for itself.
Sure, absolutely. And I know that you guys also did like a thunderclap campaign. There's all sorts of things that you did. If I recall correctly, when your book launched, you had over 100 reviews on Amazon before it ever came out. So how did you build that following in that group?
It was interesting.
I'm sure, by the way, anyone else who's creating a book right now is thinking to themselves, well, how do I get all that stuff? It sounds great that I should do it, but how do I do it? So give us some.
How do you do it? So for me, the marketing really started about 4 to 6 months before I put out the book. And what I did then is I joined as many interest groups of my target audience as I could. So for me, it was other authors, it was entrepreneurs, and it was small business owners. So I joined as many groups as I possibly could, both online and offline, in these groups, and integrated myself in them. Tried to create as much value to these people as I possibly could for a couple months. And then I used a whole bunch of native advertisements. So I'd write about success that I was having pertaining to that audience in an article. And at the end of that article, I'd have a specific opt-in bribe or a content upgrade. You know, hey, I've had success with this. If you want my email swipes from this thing that I've had success with that pertains to authorship, enter a new email, I'll send them to you. What I did is I started to then pull all of the best early adopters from those existing groups, and then I started my own group, kind of following my process of producing the book. From there, I was able to pull people into a book launch team that started about a month before my book went out, and the Amazon page for my book was live about 3.5 weeks before the book actually went out for sale. So
So the
at
book,
that
the book
point,
launch team. I'm sorry, the book launch team that you created. How did you kind of mobilize those people, and what did you ask them to do that generated the results that you got?
yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. It was people, I already had close to 1,000 people in a group that was kind of following the process of my book from these other processes from 4 to 6 months. It's really pounding the pavement. At that point, I just put out an article. I said, hey, I'm going to give you guys, if you want to help me support the book, in exchange for a honest review of the book and helping me promote it, I'll give you a free digital copy and a free audio copy of the book a month before it comes out. And then I just took an application, and the application was as basic as, name, email, social network, what are you going to do to help me support the book?
Yep.
That was really it, and I was overwhelmed by the response. I didn't know whether I'd get enough people, but within less than a day, I had 150 people, which is what I wanted.
That's amazing.
And then from that group, yeah, we did a thunderclap, so everything went out at once, and I just kept pushing them, say, hey guys, when you finish the book, please write a review, and I mean, thankfully, they liked the book, so the reviews are positive, but
Yeah.
it was very much, I was very upfront in saying it has to be an honest review, and you must disclose that you got a free early review copy of the book in your review. And if you look at the review for my book, you'll see that almost every single one of them did, in fact, disclose it.
Yeah, that's great. And I think one of the things that I want to make sure the audience takes away from this is when you connected in these networks, you weren't a leech. You were adding value to the other people there, because I think that's a mistake that a lot of people will make, is they show up saying, hey, come help me. You were helping them, and then people felt, very comfortable helping you in return.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, I mean, this is no secret, like, who is your book for? Or who is your product for, whatever you're doing? What is the one thing or the couple things they really need to know? Where do these people hang out? How can you go where they hang out and give them what's the one or more things that they really need to know? And then people are going to be attracted to you. And next thing is just making it really easy to gain traction towards those people, which is as simple as a really specific, detailed, content upgrade to get them to join your email list. That's the easiest.
Yep. Okay, great. And by the way, just to let our listeners know, if you've got questions, you can use the question box, fire those up, and then when we get to the end, we'll go through and address those different questions. And if I recall correctly, John, do you have a flight that you've got to catch?
That's me.
No. I'll
Jason.
be here.
That's Jason. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Jason.
Making sure. All of a sudden, I was like, I think. I mean, you may be out at the beach. I see the people in resort attire behind, so we're all envious at this point, especially those of us in feet of snow here.
I apologize if there's some noise in the back. My internet cut out at my house this morning, so I have to be in a coffee shop right now.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. So thanks. I mean, I think that's basically, so it's about getting that critical mass, building that following, and then in essence, you had a tribe of people helping launch your book. You weren't doing it alone.
Yeah, it's basically the thought process of if you try to promote your book when it comes out, you're 4 to 6 months too late. You need to know way beforehand who your book is for, and you need to go where those people are and integrate yourself into those communities, adding value, bringing them back into your own community. I mean, you always need to bring people back to an own platform.
Yep.
No matter what. It's just a matter of doing that slowly over time by adding value versus just trying to leech and, when the time to sell your book comes.
That's fantastic. Let me jump to Jason if we can. So Jason is someone who, if you don't already know him, is well known for helping extremely high performing young adults, and it could be athletes, right, and professional athletes. It could be entrepreneurs, and it's all about developing that authentic confidence. So talk a little bit about that, Jason, because I know you're going to give us an idea of how to find your speaking topic.
Yeah, for sure. So I work with, like you said, high-performing young adults to help them develop. Authentic confidence is a real part of it, but really self-love and self-compassion. So often, extremely high-performing people, their success is symptomatic of having a flawed relationship to themselves. And the reality around that stuff is not actually that this is just relegated to high performers. We never learn how to know ourselves, how to love ourselves, how to treat ourselves gently. At all in school. I wish we did. I really wish we did, but we don't, and I help with that as a speaker.
And now, how do you transition from that into helping people find their speaking topic? Because I know that this is an area that you hit, and people go, "Wow, he's amazing at this." So how do other people tap into that?
That's such a good question, Ian. So first of all, I need to say this because it's going to be on my mind otherwise. John, the webinar going live and a bikini woman immediately standing up and walking by, like literally seconds after we go live, was the funniest thing I've seen. I don't know how many webinars I've done. Nothing like that's ever happened. So sorry, for myself, I needed to get that out.
By the
And
way,
that's my future wife as well, just for anybody who's wondering. That's not just some random woman.
Hey, John, for the recap, let's invite her back for the Q&A.
Yes, absolutely. I'll tell her. She's beside me now.
So Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, Ian, let me answer your question. So for the people listening, let me be clear about something, because this is a huge mistake that I made. The singular most important sales and marketing decision that you will make is the topic that you speak on. And what I want to cover, I know I've got 8 minutes, I'm going to try and keep it tight. What I want to cover is, first of all, how to find that topic, and then how to validate it and ensure that there is a market for what you want to speak on before you ever put any energy or resources behind it. So here's how most people do it. Most people do a little bit of research in speaking and realize, oh, wow, the 3 biggest markets, and this is true, the 3 biggest markets are sales, leadership, personal development. And within personal development, these days, it's positive psychology and spirituality. So somebody thinks to themselves, oh, shit, I'll read 10 sales books, I'll work for Cutco for a little while, I'll get some stories. And here's what happens. They're forced to compete on price. Like, there's a million sales speakers out there. If somebody wants a sales speaker, they're going to buy the cheapest one. And that's going to drive your price down to like $2,000 a speech. Now, if you're just getting started, it sounds like $2K a speech is a lot of money. Look, I lived in the $2,000 speech realm for several years. I was living as a bachelor. I was living a minimalist life. It's not, I know this sounds crazy. It's not doable. 2K is not going to work. So the question you have to ask yourself is, how can I become a category of one? And here's how I hope you think about it. This is what I want you to do. What I want you to do is harness your unique life story, your worldview, the wisdom, and really at a deep level, if you want to go there, the gift that you've been given. Everybody has some gift, and if you can learn to harness that and express that to the world and harness it in favor of other people, holy heck, are you going to get results? Not just in business, but in life. So the question then is, how do you figure that out? So there's 6 or 7 questions I would like you to ask yourself. I'm just going to cover 2. I got a huge amount of help from other speakers when I was starting out. Because I only have 8 minutes, I've put together an article. You can get it for free. It's at ignitedleadership.com/pro speakers. Put in your email address. The article's not done. I start a tour in about 30 minutes. But as soon as it's done, I will send it to you. It's not like there's no upsell, nothing. It's my thank you. But the 2 high leverage questions I want you to start off by asking yourself these. 1, what am I most passionate about in the world? And there's no right or wrong answer to that. Just what are you most passionate about? And 2, and this is probably the one to really dig deep on, what is the singular most important piece of advice that you could give to anyone else in the world? And this is not subject matter specific. Maybe it has to do with their love life. Maybe it has to do with meditation. Maybe it has to do with creativity, business, customer experience, fitness, whatever. No right or wrong answer here. And go take these questions, journal, reflect on them, be honest and open. You don't have to share your answers with anybody. But as you're journaling and reflecting, notice the themes that come up again and again and again, and this is going to give frameworks to your speaking topic. Now, as sake of example, let's say that your topic, the thing that comes up again and again and again is meditation. What you want to do now is validate that topic. Now, here's the mistake I made. So when I was 22, I just finished spending 3 years traveling around the world, and I had no money. I got corporations in the States to sponsor my travels. And I realized, oh, well, I want to speak on this. I want to share this with the world. So I called a bunch of colleges and universities, people that I thought were my ideal market, and I asked a question that seemed like the right question, but it's not, and I don't want you to make my mistake. The question I asked my prospective clients was, are you interested, I'm doing this because I'm on the phone, are you interested in speakers on how students can volunteer in the developing world? Almost 100% said yes. So then I set up my sales, set up my marketing, and just rejection after rejection after rejection. The question I want you to ask once you focus in on your prospective speaking topic is not, are you interested in this? The question should be, have you hired speakers on this topic in the past 3 years?
Great question.
If the answer is no, yeah, and that caused like a year and a half of pain for me. And here's the subtlety. When I switched to framing it about leadership and I focused more on leadership, colleges, universities, businesses hire speakers on leadership all the time. I went from 5 gigs in my first year to, I don't know the exact number, but well over 20 in my second year, because I found a topic that I loved that I have direct experience with that there's a market for. And just one final thing about this as far as the validation goes. There's when you get into speaking, and really just if you've thought about life a lot, you'll realize that there's this truth about humans experience the world, and that is that I experience the world directly from me, from the Jason perspective. What I care about first and foremost is Jason. And what your audience cares about, and don't get me wrong, I love many, many, many people in my life. I'm blessed by that, but I can't help but experience the world from my own worldview. Your audience, your clients, what they care the most about are themselves. So instead of saying, hey, I've got this great speech on meditation, do you buy or hire speakers on meditation? When you're validating your topic, frame it in terms of how everybody in the audience benefits. So say, hey, I'm thinking about setting up a speech and doing trainings on how to quiet your mind and how to maximize your focus and how to be more productive and how to enhance your creativity and confidence. Have you hired a speaker on that in the past 3 years? And if the answer is yes, and I would encourage you, the people I work with one-on-one to set up speaking businesses, I encourage them to get at least 5 yeses before they move forward with their market. If you have a yes, if you have found a topic that resonates with you and you get those 5 yeses, move forward, because you're going to love working with this. You're going to be able to provide value, and you know that there's a market, you know that there's an audience. So that is how I would go about picking the topic. As Ian mentioned, I'm going to stick around, Ian, for like 2 or 3 minutes if you have follow-ups, and I know you have to pass the mic. But I am hopping in a car to go to the airport right now. This is a sneak preview of your life. Is like you get to just move like in a whirlwind from amazing event to amazing event. I was telling the fellow panelists that this is a huge amount of fun even before we went live, before John's fiance walked behind him. And this is like a preview of what's to come. So I won't be here for you. So I won't be here for the Q&A, but if you have questions, please email me. It's jason@ignitedleadership.com, and I'm going to give this to Alex so he can share that with the panel. That's the link to download the lecture notes. And this is my personal email address. I answer all these myself, and we'll keep doing it until I can.
Jason, that's awesome, man. It's great information. We'll have you drop on so Clay can hop into your slot there. Safe travels, and we'll catch up with you soon. And I know Clay will be joining us in video momentarily here.
Okay, to the other speakers, thank you. It was an honor, Ian. Thank you for moderating. Hurdlr, your product is really great, and most of all, I see we have got 86 people with us right now. It is literally because of the 86 of you that we all get to do what we love. So thank you, everyone, to tune in.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Absolutely.
Godspeed to everyone. I'll hopefully connect with you all soon. Bye, guys.
Cheers, Jason. Thanks. All right, so Clay, we'll get you dropped in here as soon as you're able to join us again. There's Clay Hebert. So let me give an intro to Clay. Before I do, just to give people kind of a tip our hand a little bit. So we're gonna have Clay speak. We're gonna have Sharí Alexander, who's talking about this idea of persuasive techniques for speeches to get people to move to action. Joey Coleman's going to talk about how to grow your speaking business full time. And then Michael Port is going to talk to us about how we go from just delivering a speech to a heroic performance. And many of us who are in this group have actually studied with Michael, and so we can attest to the fact that this isn't fluff, that you're going to see some major stuff. But Clay, let me turn to you, and before you introduce yourself, Clay, what I want to say is that Clay is a guy who's best known for his amazing success in attracting a crowd. In many cases, it has to do with crowdfunding. Most of us who know him well on this thing would say that no matter what room you're in, he's the smartest guy in the room, and he'll never tell you that, and he's going to blush right now, but he's totally the smartest guy in the room. So, Clay, how's it going, man?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks, Ian. Thanks for that. Honored to be with all you guys, friends and heroes.
Yeah. So talk to us about, and I've had you on my podcast talking about this idea of the intro, but give a little bit of the backstory and talk about this thing that people aren't going to believe, the 6-word intro. So give us a little tip on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was out here in San Diego in 2013. I was at a conference put on by a friend of mine and some of ours, Jim Quick. It was called Superhero You, and the speakers were great caliber. The attendees were interesting people. And on one of the breaks, I turned around and I met this guy. He said, a question that all of us get asked, multiple times per day, 1,000 times per year, so what do you do? And my answer was horrible. My answer was embarrassing and not confident. I think I looked at my shoes. I looked over his shoulder. I said mumble something, Accenture, left Accenture, studied this in Kickstarter, and it was just a rambling, barrage of anything that was not confident. If I would have confidently said I'm a carrot farmer, it would have been a better intro than what I did. But I didn't know who he was at all, and so after that, I didn't even realize how bad it was when I was done. I was maybe a little embarrassed, but that's just what we do. And when someone asks, so what do you do? And so I said, so tell me about you. What do you do? He had said his name was Matt. He said, oh, I run a little software company. I said, that's cool. I love technology. I love startups. Like, what software company? And he said, it's called Automatic. And I knew that Automatic was the parent company of WordPress, which is a technology that powers 25% of the internet. And so this guy, in a moment, I realized I was speaking to Matt Mullenweg, the founder of Automatic and the creator of WordPress, that all of my websites ran on and everything else. So he was one of my internet heroes and everything else. And here I just gave a very embarrassing self-introduction. So it reminded me of the Chris Farley Saturday Night Live skit where you're like, oh, so stupid of how I introduced myself. So I walked away from that interaction. I think I skipped the next section of the conference because I was wandering the hallway thinking about this embarrassing introduction to one of my heroes. And I said, I never want to do that again. I never want to introduce myself that poorly. So I thought about, what would be a better introduction. And for a long time, I was hung up on the words, like, what are the right words and what's the perfect way to say it? And then I realized that a big part of it is just how short and sweet it is and how confidently you can say it. So I came up with this short framework. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'll go quick. But there's a couple different versions of the framework. But the base one is I, and then help or some version of the word help. Could be connect, could be inspire. And then whoever it is you help, your client or your customer, and then whatever you help them do. So I do a lot with crowdfunding and Kickstarter and Indiegogo, but I don't mention all Kickstarter and Indiegogo. I say I help entrepreneurs fund their dreams. So when someone says, Clay, what do you do? And I say, what's amazing is you can kind of say it with this confident handshake and this, I was on a podcast yesterday talking about this, and we came up with the line, like the Clooney twinkle, how George Clooney would smile when he said, if someone asked him, what do you do, if anyone in the world didn't know who he was, right? Like that kind of actor, like Michael Port knows, all these actors and stuff, and the way that you would deliver this line with a confident handshake and a twinkle in your eye and say, I help entrepreneurs fund their dreams. It's the way you say, and Michael's a pro at this, the way you say it, the way you deliver it is just as important as the words you might say. And so being able to do this, and then I joke, once you get it down short, you can customize it to whichever room you're in. I joke that if I'm in Brooklyn, I say I help creatives fund their dreams, right? Because that's what Brooklyn's full of. Or if I'm at a sales conference, I help salespeople triple their sales or whatever. So that's the base formula. It's I help whoever it is you help and whatever result you help them achieve. Then you can kind of use different versions of that. So we're a lot of us are friends here with a guy named Jason Gaynard, puts on a great conference. His main thing is he connects amazing people. So Jason could riff on this and say, I connect amazing people, and that's something you could say with the Clooney twinkle. And so I think it's and you guys, I know a lot of you, Joey and Ian and Michael have done versions of this as well. The second version, if that doesn't work or if it just doesn't feel right. So my girlfriend Julia tried to figure out how to explain what she does with that formula, and it didn't really work. I help people organize their files. I help people clean up their computer. It was just never, and she didn't want to use, I help people increase productivity, because one of the rules is no buzzwords. You can't use, methodology. You shouldn't use anything, almost anything 4 syllables is off limits. You shouldn't use any buzzwords. So she said, the second formula is I'm X for Y, right? So she said, I'm a personal trainer for productivity, because everyone knows what a personal trainer is and does, and then most people know what productivity is, that it's someone that works with you to improve an aspect of your life. So she just says, I'm a personal trainer for productivity. So those are kind of the 2 base formulas.
That's perfect. And it's something that I think people can all take to heart. And remember, anybody who's thinking to themselves, well, but that doesn't give enough information, remember that when you use that 6-word intro, what's the goal, Clay? What do you want the other person to do after you've given that intro?
Yeah, so the first goal is for them not to be bored out of their skull, because most of us have a bad self-introduction, when someone says, so what do you do, my mind's already thinking about picking up groceries or what I got to do next week, because I know that it's going to be, well, in 4th grade, and their long introduction. If you toss the ball back to them really quickly, like I help entrepreneurs fund their dreams, it hits the ball back to them, so they respond, and then they get to ask questions. Often people will say, oh, are you a VC, or what kind of entrepreneurs, or what do you mean by dreams? It allows them to take the conversation wherever they want to take it, and it kind of opens it up. So it's the confidence of delivery. It's not boring. The goal is to be interesting. And the goal is not to say everything, right? This is not an essay question where it's a short question and a long answer and then you're done. It's a conversation, right? So it's to help them to dictate where the conversation goes.
Reminds me of our buddy Marcus Sheridan, who says the purpose of a home page is to get people to want to go to page 2.
Exactly.
And so you don't have to put everything on your home page. You just have to have enough that gets them to want to go to the next one. So Clay, thanks, man, for encapsulating that so well. And obviously, in the notes and on the site, and I'm sure in a follow-up email, the people at Hurdlr will share everybody's contact information so that people can follow up with additional questions we don't get to today. So with your permission, Clay, I'd like to jump to Sharí Alexander, who I will tell you, I'm embarrassed. I didn't know before yesterday. I got to meet her, and after talking to her for a little while, I'm like, wait, the phone call had to end. And then I remembered we get to talk again on this webinar. So, Sharí, talk to us about your background. I know it says taking the dark arts of influence into the light, and your background working with special forces and CIA and people like that, and how they help persuade people. So talk about how that moves into the area of persuasive techniques for speeches.
Yeah, absolutely. So everything that I teach around influential communications is based off of personally, sorry, that's my dog you're hearing, personally studying under and learning from CIA agents, even hostage negotiators, con artists, even pickup artists, and everything that I learned from them. The shocking thing was that they all use the same techniques. They may call it something different, they may use these techniques for different purposes, but basically they have cracked the code on what it means to be persuasive. And the sad truth is that entrepreneurs haven't, and many speakers haven't, and many copywriters haven't. They're still trying to figure it out. And so going along the lines of Clay's is I help entrepreneurs be more persuasive. Bam! So one thing that I learned is that, first of all, as a speaker, you have to realize that if you want to be persuasive, you have to know this one rule, that influence is communication with a goal, which means, pulling from that old Steve Covey adage, is that you need to start with the end in mind. What is it that you want to happen by the end of this speech? And there's two versions of that. What is it that you want your audience to think, feel, or do differently by the end of your speech? And then the other is, what do you want from the speech for yourself, for your business? And that could be a lot of different things. It could be you want them to refer you for another speech. It could be that you want them to hire you as a coach. It could be, buy my book or sign up for this program, whatever it is. But if you're not very clear on what those goals are, then you've probably educated your audience, but you haven't led to any specific action by the end of the speech. And so you start with the end in mind, and then the second is a very specific technique that I learned from the agents, and this is the hourglass technique. And basically the general rule of thumb when it comes to human psychology is that we remember what happens at the beginning of an experience with more detail, more clarity, and more emotional connection, and we remember what happens at the end of an experience with more detail, clarity, and emotional connection. But this middle part, we kind of forget quite a bit about. And as a speaker, this is very important for us to know, because we often focus so much about this middle part, where all of our amazing, wonderful wealth of knowledge and content comes through, and we think, oh, I'll just kick things off and get my speech going, and then at the end, when the timer goes off, then, I'll wrap up and say thank you very much and walk off. And you've actually missed out on the two most persuasive parts of your speech, and that's the opening and that's the ending. And so I really recommend that you start off by thinking about your speech as, what is the mindset that I want my audience to have at the beginning of the speech? Do I want them to feel like the world is filled with possibilities? Do I want them to feel like they can be inspired? Do I want them to feel like there is hope, not all is lost? What is the mindset that you want them to have in order to guide them through to your content? And then what is it you want them to think and feel by the end of your speech and the way I often think about it is, as they walk out those doors, what do I want them saying in their head? And if I have those two things, the middle part falls into place because that's your expertise, that's your experience. You've got that down. Focus on the beginning and focus on the end. That's the hourglass technique. And just as a little bonus, this absolutely applies to conversations as well. That if you remember that people remember the beginning and people remember the end of an experience with you, then that middle conversation gets a little bit lost. But if you focus on building rapport and connection with somebody at the beginning of the conversation and refocus that at the end of the conversation, they are going to remember you more and want to do business with you more often. So that's my first technique for you guys. Now, I did say persuasive techniques, so here's another one that's one of my favorites. It's called the half and half technique. And this is basically using a mixture of using a presupposition in your statement, as well as a little bit of social proof, if you're familiar with Stephen Covey's work. It's one of my favorite ways to get somebody to buy into your premise. So the basic premise is this, is that at the beginning of your statement, if it is something that your audience self-identifies and says in their mind, yes, that is me, that is true, then they are more likely to agree with the second part of your statement. Because if I am this, then yes, I am also that, because you have attached these two things together. So a simple example is this. You could say, like, well, as a man, I'm sure that you appreciate the importance of having freedom in your business. Those things have nothing to do with one another. But if I'm attaching it just within that one sentence, you go, yes, I am a man, and so then, yes, I like freedom in my business. You are correct.
That's great.
It's more powerful than asking a question of, would you like more freedom in your business? Because then it opens the possibility for it to be, I don't know, or no, or maybe, not as powerful. So I wrote a few down because thinking of who the audience is today.
Yeah.
So I work with a lot of people in the health and wellness space, personal trainers, dietitians, all of that good stuff. And so one thing that they could say in a speech is, as somebody who's interested in health and wellness, I'm sure you also appreciate the importance of the mental game in order for you to have a strong mental game to then have a strong body. So just by saying, like, as somebody who's interested in this, I know you understand the importance of this, rather than the conversation being, do you understand the importance of having a strong mental strategy as you're, weightlifting?
That's
well,
great.
No, I didn't even know that was a thing.
And the beauty here, Sharí, is that we've gone from the dark arts to Jedi mind tricks now. This is like the next one is, these aren't the droids you're looking for. I love it.
Exactly. And so then just one last one for the speaker, the speakers in the group is another one, like, so if, let's say that I'm like an image consultant and I want to work with professional speakers, then I would probably say something along the lines of, as a professional speaker, I'm sure you know the importance your personal image plays in how people perceive and receive your message, which is 100% true. But rather than saying, is your image important to you? Is your brand important to you? It's not nearly as powerful. They will say, yes, I am a professional speaker, so yes, I do see the importance, and I agree with what you're saying. So figuring out, and you don't want to have a whole speech of this, but figuring out opportunities to say that whenever you're asking an open question, see if you can use the half and half technique instead.
That's great, Sharí. So I love that. With the hourglass technique, focus on the beginning and the end. That's what people remember. And then there's half and half, so they can identify with the first half, and they're more likely to buy into the second half. And then these aren't the droids you're looking for. It's just kind of an added bonus.
Exactly. And that stormtrooper will be thinking, those were the droids I was looking for.
Exactly. It's perfect. So now we got it. Thanks so much. And, of course, you'll stick around for Q&A as well.
Absolutely.
I have the good pleasure of introducing my good friend Joey Coleman. I've shared the stage with him and spoken at events with him many times. And I will embarrass him by saying that he is truly one of my favorite speakers on the planet. And if you've never had a chance to see Joey speak, you are really missing out because, and you see everyone here who's seen him nodding their head. I could probably say the words in Joey's talk, yet every time he speaks, I'm captivated by every word. So based on that now, Joey, now that I've set the bar so low.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks.
I'd love for you to jump in now.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks so much. And let me begin by kind of echoing what Jason said at the beginning of the webinar. For those of you that are watching the webinar and thinking I might like to become a speaker and do this full time, one of the coolest aspects of this business is getting to meet people like you see in the webinar right now. I'm thrilled to say I'm friends with everyone on this webinar. We hang out at events on stage, we hang out personally in our own lives, and it's a great group of people, and you're hearing from some fantastic pros today. When the folks at Hurdlr, who, as Ian said, incidentally, I've been a beta tester on the software that they have for speakers from before they even had it specifically for speakers. It's incredible. But when they reached out and said, hey, would you be interested in doing this? Not only did I say yes because I knew the other people that were going to be on the webinar and was really excited about it, but they asked me about something which has actually been a little bit of a more recent transition in my own life, and that is, how do you go from being a part-time speaker to being a full-time speaker, making it your sole business? And that's really been a transition that I've done in the last 2 years. I've been speaking for years and years, but it was always kind of this part-time afterthought thing. So in thinking about how I could share in a few minutes some of the things that I've learned that will help you transition from being a part-time speaker to a full-time speaker, I came up with 4 key ideas and then a little bonus that we'll cover at the end. So the first one is introduce yourself as a professional speaker. Now, this seems so obvious, right? But the fact of the matter is, and I love Clay's 6-word intro, and you're going to see how I use it right now. If I meet someone on a plane or at an event, and they say, hey, what do you do? My answer is, I'm a professional speaker. Because what happens then, and a lot of people are like, wait, why professional? And what do you mean by professional? And speaker, like, I don't usually meet speakers. Like, of course, we're talking right now, so I get that you speak and have probably been doing it since you were 2, but what do you mean professional? That sends a subtle message that this is my work, and a subtle message that I get paid to talk, right? So it eliminates the looky-loo tire kickers that are looking for a speaker to do a free gig. And invariably, the follow-up question then is, well, what do you speak about? And to Clay's point earlier, now we're getting the volley back and forth. And now I hit them with my 6-word intro. I teach companies to keep their customers. Now, if I'm talking to somebody that runs a company, I've got them now because they're like, holy cow, you tell people how to keep customers, you teach them how to do it, and now we're in and we're off to the races. So like I said, it seems like a very obvious thing, but telling people that you are a speaker will revolutionize your speaking business. I cannot tell you how many more gigs I've gotten from actually opening with that intro as opposed to talking about what I speak about. As Sharí said, the subject matter expert, that, you know, I can talk about that all day long, but I've got to give them a context for how it's relevant to our conversation. The second thing that I think you should do is know that every time you give a speech, you actually have 3 audiences. Now, most speakers think, well, when I'm standing up in front of the room, I have the people sitting in the audience. That's my audience. And you're correct. That's audience number 1. The people that are sitting in the chair listening to your message. Audience number 2 is the event coordinator or the agent or the logistics person who booked you to speak. And their main desire is not that you have great content. It has nothing to do with your content. Their main desire is that the audience says, that was a great speaker, and I got a lot out of it, and goes back to that event person and says, we want more like that. And the way that loop usually works is with your third audience, the people that are sponsoring the event or hosting the event, the company, right? What are you doing to make them look good so that by default, the transitive property tells us, okay, well, if the speech was good, it must mean the people that hired the speaker are good. So therefore, we want to do business with them, right? And all boats rise together. So when you're giving your speech, a lot of speakers focus on, well, how can I mold the content? I would encourage you to also look at what are you doing to make sure you deliver for the event coordinator or the person who booked, as well as the sponsor or the organization that's hosting you. The third step actually ties back to something Jon said in the beginning. You have to give a killer speech. You have to. You cannot give a crappy speech, paint it gold, and say, oh, there you go, look, it had beautiful slides. Yeah, but if your content is worthless, it doesn't matter how great your slides are. Or if you've worked with somebody like Michael who's a professional and you're like, oh, my polish, it's down, it's good, but there's no substance and core to your message, well, then why have I just wasted my time? You got to deliver a killer speech. And the way I think to do that is to always focus on 3 things. Number 1, how are you going to get your audience to think differently? How are you going to make your audience feel differently? And the one that most speakers completely forget, and frankly, this is where I've been able to book a lot of gigs, if you're in the room when I speak, you will act differently after my speech. Not only will you think differently and feel differently, you will go back and change your business. And if you don't go back and change your business, I've failed. And so I tell the event coordinators and the sponsors, like, look, this is what you're getting. You're not getting a talking head. You're not getting a guy that's going to make them cry, and then 6 months from now they won't be able to remember why they cried. You're going to get the guy that's going to give them an action plan that they go and implement into their business starting the next day. Finally, the fourth thing, do a little post-presentation magic. And what I mean by that is I do not give a speech without offering prizes to the audience if they fill out a survey and tell me what they thought of the speech. It just doesn't happen. If I give a speech, there's the opportunity to win a prize, right? And when I say prize, I mean cool prizes, not like, hey, an hour of consulting with Joey, right? No, that's a prize for me because it's a sales call, right? I'm talking about prizes they might want. Last week I gave a speech in Scottsdale. I gave away Apple Watches as the prizes. Now, some of you aren't Apple fans, but everybody knows that an Apple Watch is not a cheap prize. And so if they get it and they don't want it, they can give it to someone else, and that person will think they care. And what I do in this survey is I say, what did you get out of the survey? What did you like? What didn't you like? What could we have done differently? And overall, what's your general feeling? Now, I pull out the what you didn't like, and I use that to hone my craft. I pull out the what are you going to use to change your business going forward, and I make sure that's in every speech I give. And then I take all the data, and guess what? I give it back to those first two audiences, right? I give it back to the event sponsor and the event coordinator who hired me. So now they get proof that their audience liked me. Not just the standing ovation, not just the, hey, by the way, Joey was great. They get, okay, there were 1,000 people in the audience. Here's surveys from 780 of them. And I get huge responses because they want the free prizes, right? And here's what they had to say. So now they have proof that their investment was worth it. All of this stuff ties into how do you create a great impression. One of the things I talk about is the importance of the first 100 days of the relationship and how you can make that fantastic. If you go to joeycoleman.com/Hurdlr, you can download a 4-page article that was in Speaker Magazine, which is the magazine of the National Speakers Association, beautifully written by an amazing writer, Sharí Alexander, who wrote this story about how can you grow your business as a speaker by specifically connecting with the event coordinators and the event sponsors. So that's available for free. There's no email opt-in. You know, you can just go hit the link and download it. And excited to answer any questions people have when we get to Q&A.
Cool. So Joey, before I turn over to Michael, I just want to recap your 4 things, which are first, introduce yourself as a speaker, novel concept.
And as a professional speaker.
As a professional speaker. Second, make sure that you recognize the 3 different audiences that are out there. Third, you got to deliver a great talk, maybe even a heroic performance, which Michael will get to in a second. And then finally, make sure you deliver that post-presentation magic.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So now I've got the pleasure of introducing Michael, who is a friend of mine. I've participated in his program, his Heroic Public Speaking Live, which actually comes up in February, the 15th, 16th, and 17th, right, Michael? Right, in Fort Lauderdale. Absolute amazing program. Clay Bear's been in there, and Michael's a multi-New York Times bestselling author. Book Yourself Solid. His latest book, Steal the Show, is really just like the Bible of professional speaking. Really just amazing content in there. And if I thought it was just okay, I just would have listed the title. But it's really, really remarkable, and there's great content in there. And his Heroic Public Speaking program helps everybody from newcomers and novices to A-listers. And as I said, a number of us in here have gone through his program. So, Michael, it's a pleasure to have you here to impart your wisdom on this audience.
Well, thank you so much. That's a very kind introduction. And, you know, I never take these kind of opportunities for granted. I mean, the people that I see on my screen right now are all extraordinary. There's only 2 people here I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, but I'm really looking forward to it, and I love what you've brought. So it's important to me that everybody knows that I don't think there is one way to be a performer. There are so many different ways to approach a creative endeavor. And performance, public speaking, is art. You are making a kind of art when you are performing. Now, sometimes people get a little nervous when I use the word performance, because sometimes people think performing is phony or fake. But to me, good performance is not fake behavior. Good performance is authentic behavior in a manufactured environment. And the stage is a manufactured environment. It's a very strange situation. You're on a stage, and there's all these people in the room, and they're in seats, and you get to talk and they don't. That's a very unusual situation to find yourself in, and it can be very confronting, even for people who do this professionally. Even people who are just starting out but want to do this professionally, it can seem really, really scary. And they talk about this idea that people are more afraid of public speaking than death. Have you heard this?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, we hear this all the time. I think it's not true. I don't know where this study came from. Nobody's ever shown it to me. But I think the point is well taken, that it seems scary. And the reason it's not true is because we just don't think about death every day. But we often have to speak publicly, and we think about it a lot. So that's why it makes us nervous. But if you had two options, either someone's going to shoot you in the head, like I'm going to take a gun, and I'm going to put it to your head, and I'm going to pull the trigger. If you don't speak right now, you're going to speak. So I don't think it's actually as scary as people make it out to be. But the reason we're so scared is because of the fear of rejection. Think about it. The fear of criticism is just extraordinarily petrifying. And when you put yourself out there, you're sharing your worldview, you're sharing your ideas, and you're asking people to think differently about the way they see the world. And to get those ideas rejected is hard. So what do? Well, we obsess about the fact that we're going to be speaking, and we spend most of our energy obsessing about the fact that we're going to be speaking. And then maybe 2 weeks before, we put together a slide deck. And then a couple, maybe nights before, we run through it in our head a few times. Then we figure, you know what, I'm going to go in there and I'm just going to riff off my slides. I use them as notes, and then I'm just going to kind of wing it in between. And a lot of folks who have the opportunity to speak are natural communicators. So they've got the gift of gab, they're quick, they're sharp, but they know they can be so much more. They walk off the stage and they say, I know I could have done more. And when I suggest that they rehearse more, I get pushback sometimes. And the reason that I get pushback is because many folks have tried rehearsal and they felt it didn't work. And I think that they're right. I think that they had that experience. And I think the reason that they don't feel it works, that they feel like if they do some rehearsal, they'll be stiff and fake and constrained, is because they did a little bit of rehearsal. And when you do a little bit of rehearsal, when you're performing, you're trying to recall what you did in rehearsal, and as a result, you're not in the moment. You're in the past, so you're not connecting with the audience. But if we are so well rehearsed that we can, quote unquote, throw away all of the work we did to prepare, but walk on stage and organically allow the work we did to present itself to that audience, so that it feels like to the audience it's the first time that it's ever occurred. What we're doing now is we're matching rehearsal with improvisation, and we're producing authentic spontaneity. So if we want to produce something that is heroic, something that is world-changing in some way, then I think we need to give a significant amount of time and effort and love and care and consideration to the actual performance. I love what Sharí said and what Joey said and what all of you guys said, but Sharí and Joey both said, you're there to get people to think differently, to feel differently, and to act differently. And when we're trying to get people to think differently, feel differently, or act differently, we may be confronting to them. You know, if I say, look, I want you to think about yourself as a performer, right, not a speaker. I want you to think about yourself as a performer, not a speaker. They go, I'm not a performer. That's not me. I'm not an actor or something. And if I present it in that way, I might get pushback, because that might, you know, throw their world into a little bit of a tizzy. They don't know what they do because they can't be that. So what do we need to do? We need to make sure that we can present this information in a way that opens them up to the idea. And if our ideas push their buttons too much too quickly, then we may get resistance. Even if they're open people, even if they're kind and generous and they want to learn, they may get resistance. So when you're organizing a speech, think about it this way. All great speeches. Let me do something with Joey here, if you don't mind, real quickly.
Sure.
Because Joey, I've seen Joey's one of Joey's speeches, his first 100 days, and it's absolutely magnificent. Every speech has a big idea. Every speech has a big idea. Now, the big idea doesn't need to be different to make a difference. You know, Martin Luther King's big idea was that all men and women are created equal. That wasn't new. He didn't come up with that idea. It just wasn't realized. It didn't exist. So he said, that's the big idea that I need to bring out. So Joey, what's the big idea in your first 100-day speech?
I think the big idea is that you need to spend as much time after the customer purchases your good or product, caring about them, as you do before they purchase your product or service.
Perfect. He's got it right there. It's a big idea. It's really clear. It's not like going to cure cancer. No, but it is a big idea to the people in the room based on what they care about. It's relevant. That's important. Number two, he's got to go in there with a promise. His speech has a promise. So what's the promise of your speech, Joey?
The promise is, at the end of my speech, you will have at least a half a dozen ideas that you can implement starting tomorrow that will cost you nothing, that will help you keep your customers and get more referrals, which both of these will increase your bottom line.
Bam. Okay, so now we've got a promise and a big idea. Now, Joey needs to make sure that the audience knows that he knows the way they see the world, that he understands the way they see the world. Because if they feel he doesn't, even if they like his big idea, even if they want the promise, they'll go, no. He's not for me. And they'll come up with all the reasons that the promise isn't possible. Because again, it's confronting. So he's got to demonstrate that he knows the way the world looks to them. That's number three. Number four, he needs to be able to articulate the consequences of not adopting that big idea. Because then it brings up the pain which they need to feel, because the rewards, as wonderful as they are, may seem out of reach. They may seem just a little too good to be true. So if we start with the rewards, then they might go, I don't know if I can do it. But if he brings up some of those, look, here's what's going to happen if you don't adopt this worldview, if you don't follow through, go after this promise. If those 5 elements are in place, number one, the big idea, number two, the promise, number three, demonstration of the way the world looks, number four, that you can articulate the consequences of not adopting this big idea, and number five, the rewards of that big idea and achieving that promise. And that, again, your whole presentation delivers on all 5 of those elements. If those are in place, then you've got at least an overview of an idea that is worth other people's time. Now, one thing I should mention, Ian changed the title of my speech and sent it to my assistant, and I wasn't really listening to her. She's like, Ian changed the title of your speech. I'm like, great, whatever, fine. I didn't look at what it was. I trust Ian. Ian said, the title of the speech is Everything You Need to Know About Public Speaking. I'm not delivering that. Let me just be clear. That is not the promise of this, 10-minute conversation here. So I think, what I'd like to say just in closing is that I don't think you need to be an entertainer to be a performer. I don't think you need to be an entertainer to be a performer. A performer connects with the audience. That's what a performer does. A performer connects with the audience in the most open and honest way possible. And each one of us has our own style. And we should amplify that style, not try to be like anybody else. And there isn't a formula. Like here, there isn't a formula. This is the way that you present. This is where you go on stage at this time. You don't follow a W. There isn't like one way to do this. In part, the performer's job is to break the rules. Now, first we need to know what the rules are in order to break them. But we break them not to be rebellious, but to create something that didn't exist before. And that's what's exciting to people. They want to be part of an experience that they feel was new. And that's one of the things that a professional speaker does. And that's what all of the people that you are seeing right now do. And that is what is absolutely something that every single person who is watching can do right now. If they have a big idea, if they want to deliver on a promise, if they know how the world looks to the people they want to serve, if they know what those consequences look like, and if they know what the rewards are, they can go in there and they can be helpful. Because you'll never be good. One of my clients called me up one time, freaking out, totally, absolutely out of her mind. She goes, Michael, I just got booked on a morning broadcast TV show, on network TV. What do I do? I want to be really good. I said, you can't. It's not possible. And I think she thought I meant she wasn't good. So I quickly recovered from that. I said, no, it's not that you're good, but you can't go in there trying to be good. It's just not possible. You can go in there trying to be helpful. And if you are helpful, they will perceive you as good because it was worth their time. But being good is about you, and it's never about us. It's always about them. It's always about them. And when we think it's about us, that's when we start to get very anxious. That's when we get more nervous because we're worried about getting approval rather than producing results. And our job is to produce results.
That's great, Michael. There's a couple things that I want to highlight that I personally experienced with your program that I know Clay was there. He can vouch for this also, which is the thing that Clay and I talked about afterwards that was so remarkable is that when we participated in your A-lister program and everybody came out a stronger performer and more different from each other. You kind of exaggerated our unique attributes. Everyone didn't come out looking the same. In fact, we came out looking more different than when we went in, which was remarkable.
Yeah. Well, my goal is that my students, no one would ever know they're my students. That's my goal.
Yeah.
Is you should never see the technique.
The other thing that was great was on day one, Michael said, there were 6 of us, how many of you are going to be using slides? And so we all raised our hand, oh yeah, we're going to be using slides. We said, how many? And we counted up, there were probably between us about 500 slides. And through day one, Michael worked with us and then said, okay, now day 2, you can use the slides if you want to or not. And Clay, how many slides between all of us did we use?
Did we use any? None?
No,
5?
None.
Zero.
Slides, no slides. And so as speakers, oftentimes we have used our slides as a crutch. And one of the great things that you shared with us, Michael, was, look, if you own your content, if you can deliver a performance without your slides, then if you want to use them to complement different areas and give people a way to learn visually, that's great. But it's funny, I just gave a talk last week, and one of the feedback comments on the forum was, it was amazing how you delivered that without ever looking at the slides, right? Which I always think is funny. We all laugh at because if you know your stuff, you don't have to look at them. But that's something that certainly we've gained from you. So there are a couple quick questions before we wrap here, and I just want to thank everybody for imparting amazing wisdom on everyone else. And I've had the pleasure of having just about all of you on the Grow My Revenue Business Cast, my podcast, and I know that I'm fortunate that Jon and Sharí, who haven't been on yet, have begrudgingly agreed to do so. So I'm in good hands there. But there's a couple of them. The first one, and I think is directed to you, which is from Tim, that said, how much IP do you give away in your engagements to encourage people to buy your book? And of course, my knee-jerk reaction is, I give away everything. But you tell me.
It's a good question. I mean, yeah, more or less most of it. I guess the easiest way to differentiate between really free front-facing content online versus what's paid, be it behind a paywall or within a book, if I were to put it very simply, is free front-facing content is the what and the why, and the paid is the how. It's the easiest way to differentiate it in my book.
Perfect. And anyone else have a rebuttal on that? Are we good? just making sure.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I might chime in and say, I think people, especially when you're starting out, you worry that if you share your idea too much, that either A, you're never going to get paid for it, or B, you're going to run out of ideas. And both of those things couldn't be further from the truth. Especially when you're starting out, you want everybody to be talking about your stuff and doing your stuff. stop trying to monetize every interaction. Trust me, the money will follow. Like, you don't have to worry about locking down the IP as hard.
You know what, Joey? The more I give away, the more I get back. I'm sorry, Michael, and then Sharí.
No, if I may, think about musicians. People pay for the concert because they want the experience. So the intellectual property is something that helps produce lots of different experiences in different mediums for different audiences based on different needs and behaviors. So it's really the experience we're creating that they're buying.
Yep.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, they've pretty much covered it. The one thing that I heard in the question is, how much do you consider giving away? And I think that that's an important thing to distinguish, that if it's a paid speech, you're not giving anything away. You're delivering a service. And so it's your job to give whatever is necessary for your audience to achieve the goal that you've been hired to do. And then the other thing is that we retain, like, at best 80% of the knowledge after a speech, like an hour afterwards, and then it drops to like 20 to 40 within 24 hours or something ridiculous. And people know that they don't read their notes, they're not going to watch the recording, but they like having that book because it's a quick, easy reference.
And Sharí, I will tell you, I get booked many, many times for someone to say, can you come back and give the exact same talk you gave last year? Which at one level pains me, and another level is just great.
Yes.
So the one other question was, someone said, Joey, how do you handle, it's actually from Marcus Sheridan, how do you handle the timing of asking them, presumably, to fill in the survey or things like that? Do you wait until after the applause, next to the last slide? Do you ever get resistance from the organizers?
Number one, I never asked the permission of the organizer, so it's a non-issue.
And that's why I love you.
And at the end of the day, because I'm giving away prizes, they kind of don't care, because the presumption usually is that the organizers have put forward these prizes, and I don't dissuade the audience from that belief. If they want to believe the organizer did a good job looking out for them, that's great on me. I don't need that. I never end on that ask, because my belief is, performer, as somebody on stage, you need to finish strong on content, on your story, on your message. So I never end on Q&A. I never end on the ask for the survey. But what I do is I do the whole speech, and then about 6 minutes before the end of the speech, I do the survey ask. I tell them what the prizes are. I kind of get them oriented to this conversation is going to continue. And then I come back and say, great, now let's spend the final minute recapping everything we've talked about in the last hour. And it sounds so basic, of that age-old theory, tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them. The highest rated piece of my speech, ironically enough, is the last minute, the 1 minute recap, where I do a fire hose recap of everything we've talked about. They realize how much they've learned, and it ends on a high note, as opposed to ending on me saying, please tell me if you liked me, because that's what they might perceive a survey is about, when in reality it's a very specific business reason that I'm asking for it.
Yeah.
Also,
so
I like to piggyback off of that, because it seems perfectly into what we were talking about with that hourglass technique. Because I'm not necessarily what you call like a storytelling speaker. I've written speeches for storytelling speakers. I'm more of a teaching, let's get to the bare bones of what has to happen. And so I take a lot of Q&A. But if the Q&A is the end of your speech, then you need to realize that the whole start strong, finish strong hourglass, then you need to still have a closing for the end of the Q&A, rather than your moderator saying, okay, we have time for one more question. You answer it and you go, thank you for your time, everybody. No, you still have a wrap up, tie the bow with tie the present with a pretty bow, with some sort of inspirational, uplifting call to action, story, whatever it is. So that is your true close of the speech.
Yeah, I know that's something that Michael teaches us. In fact, Michael, can you just chime in quickly? Because I know you give a couple different approaches for handling Q&A, and I was about to say them, and then I realized, wait a minute, Michael's here. He can tell people what they are.
Sure. So I love what both Joey and Sharí just said, and I think they're exactly right. Taking Q&A during a presentation needs to be handled very carefully. One of the things that I do, if you're doing keynoting, which is a little different than, say, the way Sharí was saying, she will do a lot of Q&A throughout. It's a different style. There's Q&A, there's workshops, the breakouts. They're all different, and there are different reasons that you do them, and there are different ways that you handle them. But what I often do when I'm doing a keynote is I'll do the keynote, and I'll work out with the organizers beforehand that they'll give a break to the people. Then we'll come back, and I'll do the Q&A then with a host. So we'll sit on the stage and do Q&A for 15 or 20 minutes, but I'll have a host. That host becomes the facilitator, and it keeps your status higher because you don't have to deal with them and if they're going on and on and on. You know, the moderator's job is to take care of that, and you can sort of stay a little bit out of that fray. But what you do is you get the keynote, which you're in entire control of. Then you have a break. Then you can come back and you can control that keynote, the questions in the same way. The other thing that's helpful is to think about Q&A like street theater. There's two different kinds of theater. There's stable theater, and then there's unstable theater. Now, stable theater are musicals and plays. There'll be different things each night because someone will drop a line or miss an entrance, or but for the most part, it's the same show every night. Improv and street theater are unstable. Now, street theater is interesting because street theater is a series of bits, and the performer will introduce those bits in different orders depending on the venue and the audience, and sometimes they'll start with the juggling fire, but sometimes they'll start with the hat trick. It really depends on who's there. That's like Q&A. With Q&A, you want to have answers organized as bits. Now, they shouldn't sound rote, like, well, if but they're bits. You go, I know I get these 10 questions often. So someone said, why do you need a target market? I'd say, oh, there are 3 reasons you need a target market. Number 1, boom. Number 2, boom. Number 3, boom, bang. And if you can answer the question first so the whole audience gets value in the answer and then offer the specificity to that person if their question is very specific and not necessarily related to everybody, if you can go broad and then narrow with that specific bit, that chunk that you have, you'll really do a great job.
Excellent. So I want to thank everybody here, and Jason, who's not here, had to head off to the airport, but John, Joey, Sharí, Clay, and Michael, thanks so much for all of your guidance and wisdom. I know there's a bunch of questions we didn't have a chance to get to, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and I especially want to thank the folks at Hurdlr for letting us all hang out and share ideas and have some laughs here. And John, I hope things go well with your fiance at the coffee house there. And thanks so much for joining us, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks again.
Thanks.
Talk to you guys soon.